Alright guys, so trade season officially began about a week ago. So I'm gonna give you my top 10 most likely players to get traded and the contenders that they could really help out come playoff time. Starting off right away with the Atlanta Hawks is John Collins. I think he's a big candidate to get traded. He is having a really down year so far, averaging about 12 points a game. That's down from 16 for his career. He also averages about 8 rebounds a game, 1.4 blocks a game, which he has been doing a lot better defensively this year than he has in the past. But his efficiency is way down, 48% from the field, down from about 55% for his career. Also 22% from the three-point line, not good at all, especially when you consider he's a mid-30s three-point shooter usually. You know, this situation really reminds me of Aaron Gordon in Orlando, where they really try to make it work for a long time, maybe not playing with two ball dominant guards in the backcourt. I think he's getting a lot less opportunities this season, and it shows on his efficiency, getting less touches, obviously not being as comfortable when he's on the ball. But Collins is a 25-year-old pick and roll scoring power forward, and I think a lot of teams could use that. He has 2 years, about 25 mil left on his contract with a player option for the 25-26 season. So you do have him under control for a little while more. And I think that the teams that would be interested are teams like the Washington Wizards potentially in a Kyle Kuzma swap, or the San Antonio Spurs potentially getting a young guy like that to fit in with their core of Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell. Or even the Sacramento Kings, if they felt like they might want to swap him for Harrison Barnes potentially. Maybe they don't want to pay Barnes in the offseason and they want to go with a younger guy in Collins instead. Who knows? But I think those three teams would be interested in John Collins, and I think he's very highly likely to get traded by the deadline in February. Next up, we have Detroit's Bogdan Bogdanovic, who was recently traded in the summer from Utah and has had himself a career year as well. And he was recently given a 3-year extension with the Detroit Pistons, but is still eligible to be traded by this year's upcoming trade deadline. He is a 33-year-old catch and shoot sniper, and he can do a little bit off the dribble as well, but he is a fantastic three-point shooter that can get you a lot of three-pointers in bunches. He's averaging career highs across the board in all of the shooting aspects, 50% from the field, 43% from the three-point line on 21.1 points per game. The guy is absolutely an asset. He's 33 years old. He is definitely ready to be on a contender and not on a rebuilding team like this Detroit Pistons team, especially since Cade Cunningham is out for the year. There's definitely no point for Detroit to keep him around if they're trying to get a guy like Victor Wembanyama in the draft. So you might as well trade him and get value out of him. And I think the teams that would be interested are the Cleveland Cavaliers, who really need a small forward in there to go along with their fantastic other starting four, as well as the Atlanta Hawks, who I could see a Bogdanovic Collins type trade there. And finally, the Phoenix Suns. As I mentioned before, they really need a guy at that 4 spot that can really contribute and put up some points for them. So speaking of the Phoenix Suns, they have one of the most likely trade candidates as well, and I mentioned him earlier, and that is Jay Crowder. This guy is definitely going to get traded. He has not even reported to the team because he did not want to be there because of Cam Johnson taking his starting spot. He thinks that he's a starter in this league, and here are some teams that I think that he could possibly go to in, once again, the Cleveland Cavaliers. They need a 3-and-D type player in there. The Miami Heat. Once again, they need a 4 that can do a little bit of everything for them. And finally, the Chicago Bulls, because if they are not going to completely sell the entire team and just start from scratch there, I think Crowder would be a really nice addition at the 4 spot. They need consistency from that spot, consistent defense from that spot, and I think Crowder would be a really nice addition to them if they were actually trying to compete this year. But Crowder is 32 years old, and for his career, he has averaged about 10 points a game, 4 rebounds, a steal, shooting 42% from the field, 35 from 3, and about 78% from the free throw line. So definitely a solid veteran to have around. Next up, we have the Utah Jazz with Jordan Clarkson. Now, the Jazz have a lot of guys that you could potentially, have in trade discussions here. Mike Conley is another guy, Kelly Olynyk, Malik Beasley, Rudy Gay. You can go down the list. They have a lot of guys that could potentially be traded, but I think Clarkson is definitely one of the most likely to get traded. His contract is running out pretty soon. He's 30 years old, so he really does not fit this young Utah timeline, and he is absolutely having a career year here. 20 points a game, about 4.7 assists, shooting 44% from the field and 34% from 3. I think some teams that could be interested here are the Miami Heat, who need a scoring punch off the bench since Tyler Hero is now starting, the Phoenix Suns, who need other scorers outside of Chris Paul and Devin Booker to carry the load, and the Dallas Mavericks, once again, need offense outside of Luka Doncic. They need guys that can really create something out of nothing and put the ball in the basket. Next up here, we have a guy that is kind of a different kind of trade piece in Golden State's James Wiseman. This guy was selected with the number 2 overall pick in 2020, and to be honest, he hasn't really contributed much in the NBA. He's a very raw prospect. He barely played any games in college. I think he played about 3 at Memphis, and this guy is just super raw. He needs to learn a lot of things. He's only 21 years old. He has great size, 7 feet tall, and he has averaged in his career about 10 points a game, 5 rebounds, shooting 53% from the field, has potential to be a shooter, shooting 32% from the three-point line and 63% from the free throw line. And I think some teams that should take a chance on his potential and buy low on him are the Toronto Raptors, who really need a center in there that they can, really develop into a quality player, as well as the Charlotte Hornets, who desperately need a big man that can contribute for them. And at the very least, I think Wiseman can be a good scorer. Maybe he doesn't ever figure it out defensively or even shooting the ball, but I think at the very least he can be a good lob threat and a good pick and roll player to help LaMelo Ball out there. And finally, the San Antonio Spurs, who are tanking for Victor Wembanyama, but why not throw your chips at another young center with a lot of potential? That Greg Popovich obviously has a lot of experience developing good young centers, and I think James Wiseman still has a chance to be something in this league. Next up, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves with DAngelo Russell, and yes, it might be a little weird that they would be trading Russell right now. Obviously, he isn't putting up bad numbers for them, but he has always been a defensive liability for them, which they really need to solve. He's also not the greatest playmaker. He might average a lot of assists, but he's not necessarily the guy always looking to get his teammates involved and spread out the offense evenly. But he is still 26 years old, and the guy has been an all-star before when he was in Brooklyn. He is averaging 16.6 points a game, about 6 assists a game, shooting 46% from the field, 36 from 3, and 79 from the free throw line. I think a team that is trying to make a playoff push would definitely go after Russell. He may not be a guy that shows up big in playoff games, but he can definitely be a guy that could contribute to getting you to the playoffs. And he's a decent quality starting point guard in this league. Like, he's really not as bad as people advertise him. Of course, his defense is lackluster, but he's really a solid offensive point guard. I think teams that could be interested are the Washington Wizards. Again, if they don't kind of try to semi-blow it up. Who knows what they're doing with Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis. Kyle Kuzma looks like he might be on his way out. But yes, I think that they could definitely be a candidate for Russell. And then next up, we have the Dallas Mavericks, who obviously losing Jalen Brunson was huge for them. I've mentioned them as a candidate for a lot of guys in this video before, but I think he would be a really solid addition there with Luka and with Spencer Dinwiddie. And then finally, I have the Utah Jazz, who I just think is a team that they could kind of salary dump him to if they really didn't want him, and to get back a quality veteran point guard in Mike Conley, who is better at setting the table, who is used to playing with Rudy Gobert as well. Next up, we have Jakob Poeltl from San Antonio. And this guy is a 27-year-old. He's a traditional paint scoring, rim protecting type center. And he has some solid passing skills as well. He averages about 13 points, 10 rebounds, almost 4 assists a game, and about a block as well. I think the teams that would be interested in him are teams like the Brooklyn Nets, who definitely need more big men in there besides just Nick Claxton. They are very thin on big man depth on that team. The Toronto Raptors, who again really need a big man in there, a consistent big man that can protect the rim and be that last line of defense for them. And the Golden State Warriors, who also just need really solid contributors on defense. I don't know if you can really continue to rely on Draymond Green being the absolute backbone of the defense at his age. I think you need a guy like Poeltl to be in there and really be a good rim protector for them. Next up here, we have the Toronto Raptors' Gary Trent Jr., who is going to be a free agent this summer. He's 23 years old, averaging about 17 points a game, 1.6 steals a game, which sounds very good, but he is not a great off-the-ball defender. He really gets lost on back cuts and stuff like that all the time. I think it's a big reason why he got benched in Toronto. And he is shooting 43% from the field, 34% from the three-point line, which is down for him. He's usually around a high 30s three-point shooter, which I think a lot of teams would be interested. He might have just had a bad start to the year, so I think a lot of teams would be interested in Gary Trent Jr. He has his contract for $17+ million right now with a player option this summer. If he plays well enough, he will probably decline that option, and you will have to pay him in the 20 mil range to keep him on the team long term. But I think some teams that could take a chance on him are the Phoenix Suns, the Dallas Mavericks, who desperately need scoring outside of Luka Doncic, and the Golden State Warriors, who really need an influx of talent off of their bench besides just Jordan Poole. Next up, we have a name that's been in a lot of headlines recently, and that is the Washington Wizards player Kyle Kuzma, and he is 27 years old right now. He's like a combo forward that can do a lot of different things for you, but he is averaging a career high 21.4 points a game, about 8 rebounds a game, almost 4 assists a game, which is also a career high for him, a career high shooting percentage in 46%, 34% from 3, which is right on par with his career averages. Not the best three-point shooter, but he can be streaky at times. 69% from the free throw line, not the greatest obviously, but it reminds me of this type of situation that Tobias Harris had with the Clippers before he got traded to the 76ers. He's putting up a lot of stats on a team that, not to say that the Wizards are abysmal, although they have lost 10 games in a row recently, but they're not necessarily the best. He has a big role that he wouldn't necessarily have on a contender. I think he would be more like a third option, potentially a fourth option on a really good contender. Another big thing is that he is potentially going to be a free agent this summer. His contract is about $13 million and he has a player option for that. I guarantee you he will definitely waive that player option. Is worth way more than $13 million a year right now, and some team is going to give it to him, and I suspect that one of those teams will be either the Miami Heat, the Phoenix Suns, or the Dallas Mavericks that would all be interested in trading for him right now. The Heat really need a 4 that can do a lot of things for them: defend, shoot the 3, and score the ball a little bit. The Phoenix Suns also need the same type of thing since Jay Crowder no longer wants to play there. And the Dallas Mavericks, once again, just need guys that can score besides Luka, and that can really take the playmaking responsibilities off of Luka for a little while. And then lastly, we have Eric Gordon of the Houston Rockets. Feels like he's been there forever. He's 33 years old, and he is really like a microwave scoring type player that can either start or come off the bench for you. He's probably best suited in a bench role on a contender, but he is starting for this Houston team. And throughout his career, he's averaged 16 points, 43% from the field, 37% from 3, and 81% from the free throw line. And I think some teams that would really be willing to trade for him would be the Miami Heat, who I think he could really help coming off of the bench and providing them a scoring punch and some shooting as well, since their shooting has completely fallen off a cliff since last year, as well as the Phoenix Suns, who again need scorers outside of Devin Booker and Chris Paul, need to take the pressure off of those two guys, especially Chris Paul at his age. And finally, once again, the Dallas Mavericks, who need a scoring punch besides Luka Doncic on that team. As I said a million times before in this video, somebody get Luka some help. My goodness. This NBA season has definitely been full of a lot of surprises, and I think there are a lot of teams that would really want to separate themselves from the pack and reach into that contender status, and I think a lot of these trades could definitely help them out. And if you want to see what I've gotten right and what I've gotten wrong so far in this season, go ahead and click on one of these videos here. It's my Eastern and Western Conference predictions for the season, and see if I'm really smart or really stupid in terms of my predictions. And guys, most importantly, have a great rest of your day.